You are living in the most dangerous time in American history.
We won't take a single back step.
Former professional basketball player is now the Republican Party's choice.
Can you imagine Royce White, the U.S. Senator?
White won the endorsement on May 18th with 67% of the vote.
There's nothing that guarantees we win, but I guarantee you if we lose, we will die. Welcome back to another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio and powered by our favorite sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You have to buy tires from somebody, you might as well buy them from us and help fund the movement, help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement, and that's exactly what the establishment wants to take from you now. I'm your host, Royce White, here in the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Today is Monday, November the 3rd. Year of our Lord 2025. But when this interview comes out, I believe it will be Tuesday, November 4th, year of our Lord 2025. We got a pre-recording today with the great Chris Martenson. Today we have another incredible special family and friends edition. The great Chris Martenson of Peak Prosperity is going to be joining us here in a moment. And we talk about everything from the great investigative work that he's doing on the Charlie Kirk assassination. He's very, very methodical in the way that he goes through the information and the evidence. If you get a chance, please pop over to his channel and watch some of the great work he's doing in investigating Charlie Kirk's assassination. He's very, very apolitical and analytical driven when it comes to how he's investigating this and many things. I mean, again, Chris Martenson is by no means a far right or right wing fanatic or extremist. He really isn't in any sense. He's just a scientist, number one, and he does a great job in explaining a lot of things, but certainly he's done a great job in investigating this Charlie Kirk assassination. So we talk about that. We talk about the implications of the apex of the world, the Israeli government, the Israel lobby. Obviously, that's been a huge contention over the last week since Tucker interviewed Nick Fuentes, and the entire conservative world, in my opinion, has completely lost their minds. And I just want to say on the front end of this interview, American citizens have the right and in some sense the duty to question and talk to and question whoever and whatever they want. Full stop. There's not really much wiggle room there. American citizens have the right to question whatever they want, whenever they want, and American journalists have the right to interview whoever they want. It blows my mind. I refer back to Christopher Wallace's father. I remember him seeing a video of him interviewing the Grand Wizard of the KKK. And nobody, he said, well, you shouldn't be platforming this guy. It's dangerous. And I didn't think that he asked particularly challenging questions to the Grand Wizard of the KKK. And I'm not saying the Grand Wizard of the KKK to try and liken Nick Fuentes to the KKK. I mean, I'm really not. It just happens to be the same running narrative about the far right of the American conservative movement or the American political landscape. But we didn't even used to talk about platforming or not platforming people. I remember them interviewing, Charles Manson. I mean, it's just we've gotten to a strange place in this country where we are trying so desperately to control the conversation versus letting the ideas be put out on the table and let the people. And you know what it is? I think what it is, honestly, is that the gatekeepers, the power brokers of our society intimately know how uneducated the average American citizen is. So they fear what happens when an American citizen or a citizen anywhere in the world comes into contact with information that they may not they don't trust that that person really knows how to process. And to some degree that's true. Now the question is as a human being, what do we what do we value? Do we value the truth? Do we value freedom? Those are things that we have to continue to answer. The short answer is that we don't value them enough because if we did, there'd be no way we would have let our elites misrepresent us and undereducate us the way that they have. And they really have. I mean, your average American citizen doesn't read above a fifth grade level. That is that is almost unbelievable. It really is almost unbelievable. And it says something dark about our ability to comprehend things. So in some sense, they're right. In another sense, it's treacherous because they're the ones who led this whole deal. They're the ones who led the education system. They're the ones who led the mainstream media and the things that we learned from that. And they're the ones who, led the advancement of technology and the slow, corrosive nature of convenience in Western society and in all of society. So I think that's what's really driving this whole deal. More so even than them wanting to control what's said and what isn't said. I really believe uh, our elites are afraid of what happens when somebody who is too loud, too charismatic, too convincing, makes too compelling of an argument in one direction or the other, comes into contact with people who are very, very undereducated. I don't know. It just shocks me. I mean, it goes from Tucker's an anti-Semite to Nick Fuentes and then it's the Republican Jewish Coalition. They called me anti-Semitic. I've been in a number of interviews and I've actually defended the Israel position, and I'll do it again in brief here in saying people that claim that Israel is not a legitimate nation are goofy. I mean, that's just goofy. Of course, they're a legitimate nation, and I do think that many people on the left who are anti-Israel, sort of this free Palestine movement, and I'm not saying that there isn't or there hasn't been a genocide there in Palestine, and whether it's right or wrong, obviously, from a moral standpoint, it's wrong. But to make the claim that Israel is not a legitimate nation would lend credence to the idea that America is not a legitimate nation. And I do think many people on the left try and make that claim for that reason. Not so much that they care about the Palestinians. I don't buy for 1 second that the people who wave the Free Palestine flags care any more about the Palestinians than they do the black people, of which they for which they wave Black Lives Matter flags. In fact, I encountered that myself when I was leading these protests, these peaceful protests to the Federal Reserve after George Floyd died. I started hearing black trans rights. I go, wait a second, you guys don't get to co-opt a black guy dying, for some LGBTQ movement. Oh, we're all one people. Oh, no, we're not. I mean, in what sense do you gain identity by losing your identity to the collective? And that is part of the problem of collectivism is you ultimately lose your identity in pursuit of this collective kumbaya. But I say that because again, I do think that people on the left only have an interest in Palestine to try and delegitimize Israel so they can delegitimize America and say, whoa, but just because you conquered a place doesn't mean it's a legitimate country. And what's really profound about that is every country is legitimate. All the rules only apply to them. I mean, no matter what. It's if a country's border needs to be sovereign, like in Ukraine, then all of a sudden borders matter. If a border needs to be sovereign, like in Mexico or wherever else, then all of a sudden the West Bank. People show you the map of the West Bank and Israel and the conflict between there from a geographical standpoint, and then the borders matter, and then the city limits matter, then the outer limits of whatever said territory matter. But when it comes to America, the borders don't matter. It's quite interesting that they even think we're stupid enough to buy it. So the rules only apply for them. A country's a country if it's like, well, any country that's been conquered, stolen land is their deal. And obviously the Palestine-Israel conflict fits that narrative, but it's like all land is stolen then. All land is stolen. The European land that they tell us we have to defend with our sons and daughters is stolen land. And it may not be stolen on a racial basis, but it was stolen from one group of people by another group of people at some point in time. The entire European continent has been in conflict and war since the days of the Roman since the days of the Greeks. Even before then, the Phoenicians. I mean, the conflict in Europe has been one tale of conquest after another since time immemorial, and that's pretty much been the story of the entire global civilization so far as we can, remember, as far as we have record. So it again, it does kind of lend to their theory that, there are no borders, there's only one world. Okay, well, if there's one world, then, uh, you know, th- then why do we have to go fight a nuclear war with Russia? I don't get it. Russia has just as much of a claim to the lands of Eastern Europe as Israel has to the lands of Palestine, as China has to the lands of Taiwan, and vice versa, as we do to Venezuela. Then, so there's all of these inconsistent logical fallacies, logical inconsistencies that I hope we start to take more serious. But I'm not optimistic because we've come so far down this rabbit hole of short attention span, dopamine, high reward, low information. I don't know if we can even get a grip on it. In the Tucker Carlson Nick Fuentes interview is a huge indication of exactly what I'm talking about. Like, why are you so afraid? I can watch a Tucker Carlson Nick Fuentes interview and I can go piece by piece, pause, which is a great tool to have. I can pause it and think for a second. I can bring out my notebook and write down, the ideas and put them up against one another and think, okay, and you have to have some system by which you analyze ideas in general. This is the area of epistemology. How do you acquire truth? What's the process by which you determine truth? You acquire knowledge, and then you determine what is true, and then what is absolutely true or what is false. I mean, these are first principle processes that we completely have lost in our society. I mean, we have people just kind of zombified, walking around trying to make sense of things, and don't even really have a good, you know, foundation, jumping off point intellectually. And then when you run for office, all of the political consultants tell you, don't talk too highbrow. Don't get too intellectual because most people can't read above a fifth grade level. And I go, fuck you. Then they go, oh, don't say the F word. The evangelicals aren't going to support you. I go, what? you know, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, Tucker Carlson can interview whoever he wants. Nick Fuentes said some things in that interview that obviously the America First and MAGA movement agree with. Obviously. Has he said some things in the past I disagree with? Obviously. I don't even like the idea of IQ. I think the idea of IQ is deeply, deeply anti-human and anti-Christian. And I don't just say that because the narrative about black people is that their IQ is generally low, because obviously mine isn't. And, whether I have a Norwegian heritage or my Mexican heritage or whatever the case may be, I really believe, and I think there's great Christian argument for the idea that the intellect and the spirit are inextricably linked, that the development of one's spirit and spirituality are inextricably linked from their intellect, their intellectual development. So in that sense, God has given mankind all the tools we need to develop both spiritually, intellectually, and then whatever else after that, as they say in the scripture, Matthew 6:33. Seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. And what is God? God is truth. So I think you can put a group of people and expose a group of people to intellectual and philosophical value, and watch them develop differently than if they're not. That's just my opinion. And And let's take it a step further. I mean, we traditionally look at Africa and say, well, look at the third world. What is the third world? The third world is where people are less sophisticated in their drugs, piracy, and slavery, and their killing of one another. They're less sophisticated in their destruction. Sure, African tribes can cross each other's border limits, or village limits, or whatever the case may be, state limits, provincial limits, and kill one another with some sort of with some level of brutish force. Just chopping each other up like they did in Rwanda. But you can also be so smart, so sophisticated, so modern that you drop an atomic bomb on hundreds of thousands of people in an instant. Hundreds of thousands of people in an instant. There's also that way to do it. And which one is more moral or ethical, or which one is more spiritually developed? These are the questions that we have to answer. And I think there are relatively simple answers once we properly frame it and put the questions up on the table. But these are things that we have to start to discuss and wrestle with. And I don't really think there's any appetite from the American people or the free people of the world to have representation in their government that even wrestle with these things, honestly. And I think our elites play off of that. And I think that's why our elites do not like the conversation that took place between Tucker and Nick Fuentes, because they're asking questions, whether controversial or not, whether respectful or disrespectful, whatever you say about, they're having a conversation, a long form conversation that starts to wrestle with fundamental questions. And the establishment typically doesn't like when those kind of conversations take place. And they typically don't like when they challenge the conventional wisdom or structure of the narrative. And that's why Nick Fuentes went #1 on Spotify. And then they took him off Spotify. It's like, you're only making it worse. If you have an intellectual discrepancy with something that he's saying, then present it. And I do. I think IQ was created by Sir Galton and Darwin and all of these other British academic elites who are deeply, deeply anti-Christian in their thought, in their work, deeply anti-Christian. The entire edifice of Darwin and social Darwinism, in my opinion, was a project against Christianity and a rejection of Christ. That seems almost clear. If you look at the American history in our public schools, that's almost clear. Anyway, I don't mean to monologue about the interview, but we talked about some great things. I hope you enjoy the interview. I don't mean to, to carry on a tangent here, but I did feel like to preface this interview, to talk about what's just been maddening to me. Maddening. Everybody needs to get a chance to talk and get the ideas out there. Let's put them on trial, the public opinion, and bring your thinking cap, as they say. But bring your critical mind, because these are dangerous times, and uh, we are in the vortex of a revolution, of a social and cultural revolution, a color revolution in this country, but revolution worldwide in some sense. And this is the exact moment we need to be talking about fundamentals, fundamental ideas. So let's get them all out on the table so we can start to sort out what's what. Don't be trying to, "Oh, well, Nick Fuentes is too extreme." It's like, dude, you're a fruitcake. I just think you're a fucking fruitcake when I hear that. There's no part of me whatsoever that has any fear of encountering, coming into contact, having discussion, debate with the Nick Fuentes. It never, there, zero concern, zero concern, zero concern whatsoever. So without further ado, um, the great Chris Martenson, I hope you enjoyed the interview as much as I enjoy Chris Martenson. Very, very detail oriented, not only in his work and his investigations, but also in the way that he thinks and the way that he analyzes what's going on in the world. So, without further ado, I hope you enjoy it. The great Chris Martenson. Welcome back to Please Call Me Crazy. I'm here with the great Chris Martenson. Welcome back, Chris, to the show. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate your time this evening. We got a lot of things to cover. But the number one reason I wanted to have you back on the show is to discuss briefly in detail where you are in your investigation of the Charlie Kirk assassination. It's of great interest to the MAGA world, or at least it should be. If it isn't, you're probably not as MAGA or America First as you would presume. A lot of people still have a lot of questions about Charlie Kirk's assassination, rightfully so. Not only with the shooter and the strangeness around the assassination itself, but also the investigation. So, if you could briefly just, and I saw the video that you did. You went into great depth and detail, like you often do on your channel. Um, just give me a little bit of where you are, and let's try and walk through this, here this evening.
Well, the story we've been told is that this 22-year-old kid, I'll call him a kid, young man, Tyler Robinson, went up to a certain spot on a roof on what's known as the Losi building and took a single shot with his grandpa's aging Model 98 Mauser 30-06. Jumped off the roof and then put the gun somewhere, and the story sort of falls apart from there a little bit. But at any rate, we've seen a picture of the gun, and the idea is we're supposed to believe, Royce and everybody, that a 30-06 round entered a human neck off axis, not center. This is be dead center, off axis. And given where Charlie was facing and where the shot came from, that bullet would have hit here and wouldn't have encountered a single bone. And we're supposed to believe that his neck somehow stopped a 30-06 round. Now, that's the official story, right? And there's been a lot of speculation ever since because we're in a paucity environment. That's all the data we have, right? Yeah. We're missing tons of video evidence. The FBI hasn't chosen to share with us video of this individual getting on the roof and taking the shot just, 5-10 seconds after the shot's taken, somebody running across a roof. We're supposed to connect the dots in our minds that was where the shot was taken from. But I am 99.99% sure now that it's impossible that a 30-06 round fired from that location did not go cleanly through not just Charlie's neck, but probably 4 or 5 other similar necks stacked straight behind him, if you could do such a thing. And we're running experiments on that right now. I have my team. We're shooting we're using pork roasts, right? Which if you get them up to room temperature, very much approximate a human neck, and with bone in and bone out, right? Trying it from every angle. Spoiler alert. I think we're up to 18 shots right now and 18 separate roasts, and none of them have even come close to stopping one of these rounds. The only way we got a round to stop was by having this roast up against a piece of plywood. And behind the plywood, we put a cinder block. And that cinder block, the back part of that cinder block, did manage to stop that round, but not before that round pushed the cinder block across a table 4 inches. That's how much force and power these rounds have. A 30-06 is, a lot of people, they have some familiarity, Royce, I've shot a 9mm, I've shot, maybe they've shot a smaller rifle, but just to be clear, like a 22 has almost no power to it.
Right.
A 9mm is a little fatter, has a lot more power to it. But by the time you get up to like a 223, the standard AR-15 round, right? Well, that's got a lot more power, but it's still just this little tiny 55 grain typically bullet, going fast, maybe 3,000 feet per second. But I got to put this into context. 30-30, which is a big old deer round, a 30-06 is just a totally different beast. It's like the size of my middle finger without accidentally flashing you, right? It's a cigar, and it shoots this incredibly heavy bullet at a super high rate of speed. So it has what's called foot-pounds of energy that it dumps in, that it comes with. The idea that a human neck could stop that round or deflect it meaningfully in the 6 inches it has to travel going through a human neck, it's
Reach
like
is
asking me to
impossible.
believe that it's like saying, oh, building 7 came down because of office fires. Like,
Right.
It's not how these things work. And it's physically impossible.
Okay, so yeah, and I mean, I think a lot of people have a lot of questions, and rightfully so. Anytime you have an assassination of this magnitude at this level publicly, it harkens us back to the JFK era, the era of the 4 huge assassinations in the 1960s. JFK, RFK, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. Still great question about many of those in some respects.
Mhm.
Some of those questions have been answered, not answered so well. But I think people are right to have skepticism about the assassination in general, just because of the nature of it, because of the magnitude, because of the person, because of how big and influential Charlie Kirk was, but also the timing. And a lot of strange things, happened that day. And I guess, you look at back at the Zapruder film and you think, I know for me anyway, I was born in the 90s. I was born in 91. And I look back at some of the footage from the JFK assassination and think now how many more theories there are because of how much more footage there was from that day from different angles. And just the confusion that's unfolded, and help me, parse out for me or help the audience from what you've heard, which theories are or have become prominent online, which ones are real, which ones are fake, which ones are you giving some credibility to, and which ones are like, I'm throwing that out right away.
Yeah, so let's start with the throw it out right away. Exploding mic, whether it was his handheld mic or the one that was clipped to his t-shirt, right? The so-called lapel mic, the little DJIs. And if people say, oh, look, you can see it and you can see this thing travel through several frames and it's heading towards its neck. And again, the human mind interpolates. We see two dots and we go, oh, let me draw a line. Problem. If that was an explosion, even if it was a low-level explosion like PETN, but to get decent explosive charge in a small thing like that, you'd probably be using C4 or something. C4 expands at 26,650 feet per second, meaning that in a 30 frames per second, between one frame and the next, if that thing exploded, parts of it are going to be 800 feet away. You won't see it in 2 frames. So the whole idea that there was an exploding mic that you could see in more than 1 frame, you can rule that out. It's not how explosives work. By the way, his shirt would have been charred and wrecked. We probably
Right.
all saw those exploding pager thing in Hezbollah and Lebanon, right? Their jeans were torn and wrecked. Like anywhere that pager was, that's how explosives work. They explode and they have incredible pressure and also heat. So they char stuff. So let's rule that out. No exploding mic. Second, some people, again, going for the crazy old, oh, there was a subsonic round. There's no such thing as a subsonic round that was going to just instantly kill Charlie because he was instantly dead, right? We saw him go up in that boxer's pose, the decorticate pose as he tipped over. He was just out. We didn't see arterial spurting because his heart wasn't pumping. We saw this sort of dump of blood that was probably what was in his head coming out the jugular. So all the physical evidence says he had to have been shot. So whatever happened was a very, very high energy situation.
Yeah.
Wasn't a palm pistol, wasn't any pistol. There's no pistol out there except maybe the 50 Desert Eagle that could possibly have that much power behind it. But those are hand cannons, right? And then we also have 8 different recordings now from around the audience, all of which have the typical crack thump of a high-speed rifle round shot at a distance. That's the crack. That's the supersonic crack of a supersonic bullet. It has a supersonic event. And then later, because the report from the muzzle of the barrel of the gun is traveling at the speed of sound, so slower than the bullet, sometime later you hear the thump. So we know we have to account for a high-speed velocity, rifle round somewhere that happened to coincide perfectly with the event that happened to him. So that's really starting to triangulate pretty hard on the idea that, well, if you don't have a high-speed rifle round that hits him, you still have to account for the one that we know auditorially was there. And now you have to get into some crazy territory of like, oh, this was Hollywood level synchronization production. The bullet was just fired into a cinder block somewhere, and then somebody pressed a remote detonator exactly. No, that does not happen out there in real life, in a real life situation,
Right.
without lots and lots of practice. So I think we can rule out that. What I can account for, though, is there seems to be, and I haven't seen the autopsy, but reports have come out. Candace has reported on it. Colvett has said that he heard from somebody that there's a bullet in him. And we only see the one wound here. Apparently, I haven't seen the video, but Candace reported again, having seen the camera that was behind him, that there's nothing to see back there. We do have some side views and we don't see stuff blowing out the back. So I'm pretty comfortable with the idea that he was shot by something and has stayed in his body. And that's why he died so suddenly, because a bullet, if it goes through and through, Royce, this, it just makes a hole.
Right.
And that's like putting a hole punch in somebody. And that's fine if it happens to hit maybe a major artery, but you die slowly.
Right.
The way a bullet kills instantly is it dumps that 2,500 foot-pounds of pressure energy into your body and it stays there. So that's what I think we're seeing, and that's consistent with the behavior of his necklace flying off and the way his chest expands and his neck expands and his t-shirt flies. All of that says that we now have to account for a high-speed rifle round of some kind. High speed, I'm talking, well over 2,000 feet per second. That it's pretty heavy round, and it stayed in his body. And to begin to solve for those physics, he can't have been shot from the place where Tyler Robinson allegedly was taking that alleged shot from. He has to have been shot from the side, a much steeper angle. The bullet has to come down in and stay in his body. And that's a much harder thing to solve for because there's all different roof structures there, but it's kind of hard to find a shooting position that satisfies that, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean it's yeah, I mean my take on it is much like what Bannon said on day one, and this must have been in the first 24 to 48 hours. We have to solve this. We can't have a sort of grassy knoll situation here where 20 years later we're still getting information or still trying to get information about what took place this day. As far as Candace goes, I think that Candace, first of all, she's very intelligent, and I do think she's also very ambitious. I do see a change in her temperament or what it seems like her motivation is post children, which you would expect from women. Their motivation tends to change. Children have that effect on men and women, but certainly women. And so, is where I used to look at her and think she was uh, worried about her professional climb. I think they pissed her off. They called her anti-Semitic for asking some very reasonable questions about our relationship with Israel, and APAC and the other influences from the Israel lobby. And I think that she believed she was going to be able that she was big enough in some sense to still have access, and they cut her access off. I mean, immediately and totally, which is kind of profound for somebody as popular as she has been. And she's going scorched earth. So in that, I look at some of the things that she's posting online, and I listen to some of the things that she says, and sometimes I'm like, Candace, whoa, hold on, slow down, girlfriend, right? But the most disturbing video to me so far is the video of the friend. I don't know exactly what he did. Again, I don't want to, misspeak, but the guy who's taking a selfie video of, behind and he's saying, Charlie's dead. Oh, he's dead. He's dead. And I think this is the guy who may have walked off immediately when the shot went off. Um, or maybe that guy was the guy who was on the phone call, said that he called his father or whatever. And then the guy who was standing there, behind the scene a little bit, says Charlie's dead. But I mean, worst case scenario, when you look at some of those things, what comes to mind? I mean, just, regardless of the shot, where the shot was taken from, and again, I say this not to be disrespectful to the Kirk family and Erica and Turning Point, and obviously they've done great work, and there's a huge revival, you could say, of Christian nationalism, which is, I think, needed and healthy in the wake of this Charlie Kirk assassination. But some of this stuff does look odd. Am I looking at, when JFK was killed, when Martin Luther King was killed, when RFK was killed, when Malcolm X was killed, you didn't have so much footage going on at once. So if you would have been able to see some of the people's reactions or people's reactions in general after such a crazy thing takes place, that we would have those similar questions about all of those assassinations? Or am I looking at something that just doesn't smell right to you, even from some of those angles of what happened?
Well, I try not to read too much into any particular person's reactions, right? Because we
Yeah.
all react differently. And some
Right.
of us may have been in battle and seen lots of gore, and some of us, may faint at the sight of a Band-Aid being pulled off, right? So I don't try and do too much of that, but I will admit this. The totality of the oddness is kind of overwhelming at this point, right? So at a minimum, if Charlie Kirk if I was in his organization, and I was now somehow in charge of that organization or had any power within it, I'd be saying, we're getting to the bottom of this, and we're not leaving this up to those FBI clowns, the ones who hosed off the roof of the Butler building, a day later and disassembled the crime scene in Butler and never got to the bottom of it and didn't even bother to try and explain how those first 3 shots had different echo signatures from the next 5 shots in that string that was, shot towards Trump in the crowd and killed Corey Compatore. The FBI never bothered. They just said, hey, we're up yours, we're not going to investigate that. And they let that lie, right? It's just like, again, with Building 7, they're like, oh, you just have to accept the fact that we told you it fell because of a fire. And that's not true, right? So there's a spectacle component of this that's really important, I think, to understand. This wasn't somebody killing Charlie Kirk. And by the way, I do not believe it was the lone cat in that spot on the roof that they say it was, because the evidence just doesn't stack. So it has to be something else. We also know in the aftermath of it that the zone was flooded. My Twitter feed lit up with the craziest ideas, and they got huge push, and that's not organic. I know organic and inorganic. It should have been competing ideas and they all should have had about equal weight. No, the crazier the idea, the more somebody was out there amplifying it, right? And that somebody has to have that's significant power, right? You have the ability to operate a bot farm, do it undetectably, make sure that you're not accidentally leaving IP signatures that can trace back to a certain location. It takes a certain level of statecraft to do that, I would submit, or corporate craft, who knows the difference these days, right? Right. So you add that up, and then you find out that TPUSA is not doing anything to advance the investigation. They've got the relevant footage. They could release it. They could be showing due concern. They could be expressing the same skepticism anybody else would, which is, hey, we want to make sure that the right person whoever did this, we'd like to make sure they're caught. By the way, the evidence doesn't stack right now, the physical evidence. So now we have to place this into, listen, if you're somebody, you're a state and or a big player and you want to get rid of Charlie, you do that in a hotel room and he falls out a window or the usual stuff, right?
Unless you want to make a statement, unless you want to send a message.
Statement.
Yeah.
And the statement is 2 things. 1, we'll kill you. But the second is, and this is the important part of a public execution like this, is you want the official story to not match the evidence, because that's the actual power of a public execution like this, is to say, not only can we do this,
we can write the narrative about it.
And force you to have to accept or reconcile complete BS garbage narrative versus evidence. That's the power, because it says we're that powerful. We don't even have to make sense, but you have to accept it.
Yeah, well, who's interested? I mean, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Okay, there's a lot of. Well, first let's talk about this. From your research into the public assassinations that we've seen, personally for me, I always thought that the RFK assassination stunk as well. I mean,
Completely.
Sirhan, are you kidding me? I mean, just the name is spooky in and of itself, right? Sirhan is just, I mean, what kind of caricature was that? I'm not saying that he didn't, but that smelled to me as well. The JFK one, obviously, Malcolm X is all but, settled. I mean, by public consensus that the FBI was involved and there were people that infiltrated the Nation of Islam, and not so much that there were shooters in the balcony, which a lot of people believe, certainly in the Black community, but that the FBI and other intelligence communities have the ability, they're efficient in creating the circumstance for assassination just as much as pulling the trigger themselves. Martin Luther King obviously being wiretapped, by the FBI and other intelligence communities, agencies as well. From your research into these public assassinations, does this one seem like, a direct hit, or is this a situation where a rogue intelligence cable, agency is pulling the strings and creating the circumstance for assassination, versus more of a direct hit?
Yeah, that's a good question. The term we're looking for here is stochastic terrorism, where you have somebody like Randy Fine saying, I think somebody should take out Hitler before, he does any more damage, speaking about Tucker. And then the hope is that one of these million crazy activists out there will take him up on the offer, right? And then you go back and go, oh, that's just such a shame that happened. Let's all cry. That happens, but in this case, when you have something like this where the physical evidence completely doesn't match the narrative, now we have a problem on our hands, right? We have to account for that, right? So, and this one to me looks like this was a professional hit, and Charlie was shot from somewhere other than that spot. And that means that we have a big problem on our hands, and that this had to involve a lot more players. And I guess that would, yeah.
How to you, when you start to stack up the evidence, how crazy is the guy who claimed how strange is the guy who claimed credit for the assassination in real time? What's his name? Off the top of my head, I forget.
George Zinn.
George
You
Zinn.
talking about
Okay.
George Zinn?
George
Yeah.
Zinn. That's right. And they take him into custody, and then they find child pornography on his phone, which is, even that glows. I mean, that was a story. At least he was brought up on charges of child pornography. He had in possession on his cell phone, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But how? I mean, in real time, a guy stands up and says, "I shot Charlie Kirk." He has the wherewithal, in the midst of an assassination, to take credit for this, presumably to, for some ideological reason, let the real shooter get away. I mean, and then you find that George Zinn was also there during 9/11. If I'm not
Allegedly. Yep.
Allegedly, he was there during 9/11. Where does the George Zinn piece stack up in weirdness for you, sir?
Right up at the top. I mean, come on. So George Zinn is a committed, ardent Zionist. He's got that under his belt, and he happened to be there like Forrest Gump at all the big moments in U.S. history, right? So he was there for 9/11 and saw the second plane come in, if you can believe it. All that. He may be embellishing, who knows? But the idea that there he was at the Charlie Kirk assassination, and within 2 seconds, he's waving his hat around going, "It was me, it was me." The reason that I'm extra suspicious is because of where he was located. He was drawing attention to him that way. And the place where I think is most likely for the shot to have come from was exactly the opposite direction. So if he was decoying, he did a good job at it. But again, who has the presence of mind to just stand up and say, "Oh, I'm going to take credit for this right away because I want to help this person get away potentially"? I mean, that's a pretty quick thought process to go through your head, I would say, within 2 seconds.
And even more strange is, I mean, in retrospect, ex post facto, it is pretty clear that he has Zionist, I don't want to say affiliations, but he has Zionist evidence out there on him. And why would he be happy that Charlie Kirk was assassinated on face value? Because Turning Point USA and Charlie Kirk, for the major part of his career and the organization's existence, has been well funded by the Israeli lobby, well funded by the Zionist lobby, well funded and very much in support of Israel and this sort of evangelical Zionist, movement. So, is he there as a leftist? Is he there as a detractor of Charlie Kirk? Or is he there as a supporter? And then because you see what I'm saying? Isn't it? It's more strange if he's there as a Zionist in support of Turning Point and Charlie Kirk, but then takes credit for an assassination he didn't do. So does this
that is strange.
Does this call into question how the Zionists really feel or fall on the political spectrum in some sense, which we're already seeing? I mean, for Christ's sakes, we're going into one of the most important elections, in my opinion, one of the most important off-year elections, with these mayor races coming up here tomorrow, here in Minneapolis, there in New York City. And you get Bill Kristol, who endorses Mamdani, and who traditionally, I mean, Bill Kristol's a neocon. We all know that. But the neocons have done well to hide their Trotskyite, lineage, right? Their ideological Trotskyite lineage. Bill Kristol just says the quiet part out loud. No, we got to go with Mamdani. Mamdani would be he said, actually, his quote was, "Some of these young Democrats are really impressive. I almost can't even believe my eyes." It's like up is down and down is up. What do you make of, let's talk about George Zinn first. If he's there as a supporter because he's a Zionist and Charlie Kirk and Turning Point organization have been very pro-Israel, then why do you take credit for an assassination? Just because you're crazy or
Well, two angles to look at this from. So, first off, let's remember the context of the time. Maybe other people were more clued in, but I didn't find out that Charlie was maybe starting to have second questions and thoughts about being so closely aligned with Jewish money, right? Because it was only after the fact that we found out that there were these texts and certain things. And I think Candace was instrumental in releasing a lot of that. These texts where he was kind of going, I'm not sure if the juice is worth the squeeze here. And of course, there was a big thing about he wanted to bring Tucker on, and they said no. And he was brought to this intervention in the Hamptons with Bill Ackman, all that. Um, that only came out after the fact. I don't think that was really very publicly known. So I can't imagine somebody like George Zinn knew about that at that time, unless he was read into something
right.
that really wasn't very public at that
Wasn't
moment
very
in time.
popular, right.
Right. Okay, let's imagine he's there as a leftist. So I do think that this was one of the, the key sins of Charlie Kirk in the eyes of the left, right? Because we saw them all gloating and happy and, oh my God, if he could only die twice, I hope he's burning in hell. They were horrible, right?
Yeah.
Well, because his cardinal sin was he was going straight into their church, which we call universities, and unindoctrinating some of these people. And that was the cardinal sin, right? Let's be clear, because Charlie used words and thoughtfulness and his presence where he was a very caring, charismatic person, right? So that's the thing. You can't go into the Church of Communism and, dump on their indoctrination processes. That was the problem. So maybe George Zinn is a committed leftist who really didn't like Charlie Kirk because, as we all know, according to them, he was sexist, racist, all this stuff that of course they couldn't trudge up any clip, not a single clip, probably one of the most video recorded men in history. And they couldn't come up with even out of context clips that made sense. They only had that one, which they stretched into, black women, all belong on, some kind of, what was that one? He was talking about Ketanji Brown and Michelle and all that stuff. But anyway, that was the only thing they could find. And even that they couldn't get right.
Right.
They had to stretch it a little bit and say he meant black women when he had named three very specific individuals.
Yeah. Well, here, and I liked Charlie Kirk. I was on his show multiple times. I thought he was great. I thought he was sharp, very quick on his feet in person, in live situations, which isn't easy, by the way. I mean, it takes a certain talent. And if I'm being honest, if he seems a little, let's call it impatient at times, I understand the feeling. Being in some of those live situations with big crowds and people who are obviously there, not in good faith. And a lot of times, some of these young people who are at the universities, maybe you could say they're just indoctrinated. So I wouldn't say it's complete bad faith. Some of them are just, they don't know any better. I mean, a lot of them came up in Marxist education, so they really don't know any better. But some of them they're just rude, in that they don't really want to engage in a real conversation. They came there for their sort of gotcha moment. I don't know if they're trying to impress their liberal friends or progressive friends on campus. But so even when Charlie was a little rude to people in that setting, I didn't have a problem with it. The only place where I parted company with Charlie, and I think in retrospect, this will go down as one of the legitimate criticisms is his, I'd say, pretty brutal going after Martin Luther King Jr. And I say that not because any of what he said may not be in fact or true, but for me, as an American citizen, especially of the MAGA and America First cohort, any evidence that's brought to the public through unconstitutional wiretaps of an intelligence agency should be discredited out of hand. And a lot of the allegations about Martin Luther King's extracurricular activities, whether it be sexual or whatnot, came from those unconstitutional, illegal wiretaps. And I think that shouldn't have been, and I still think shouldn't be the basis of trying to discredit Martin Luther King. Now, you can look at the organizations that blossomed from Martin Luther King, or the people who helped fund Martin Luther King, some of those early attorneys. All of those things are legitimate for sure. But I also do believe that people take a turn. People have their own journey. Like Charlie Kirk was starting to think differently about our relationship with Israel. It seemed like at the end of Martin Luther King's life, he was starting to question what he was involved in, the theater of it versus the genuine outcome and result. So, but I say all that to say, um, with Charlie, does Israel, let's say, really have the most incentive to take him out? Because it seems like although Charlie was starting to question it, he was also somebody who's perfectly positioned to massage the public narrative of that relationship in a direction that's going to be beneficial in some respects for Israel going forward, as the younger generation is taking a sharp right turn away from that entire mindset. So, do you think that Israel has the most incentive to take them out, or are we looking at something else?
Well, let me broaden it. I think the Zionists, the neocons, do, and of course that includes some Christian evangelicals, right? So it could be a fairly broad group, but here is the issue that they're up against. So Israel's kind of had this stranglehold on the overall narrative, right? That they're our best ally, even though that's arguably not the case. They are strategically important, which is also not the case in that part of the Mediterranean. Kind of irrelevant. And they really had a stranglehold really on boomers and evangelical Christians. And so along comes Charlie Kirk, and you can feel the winds shifting. And of course, it didn't help that Israel went out and committed these mass atrocities, these moral abominations, right? And we're supposed to square up that bombing women and children is somehow divinely protected activity or something like that. Which, don't even get me started on that, but it's
Yeah.
not. And so all of that's happening. So I think Israel, the Zionists, plus the evangelicals, they know they've got a ticking clock on their hands. They know that they've got till the boomers basically pass out off this earth, and then they've lost the next generation. So the question is, how do you put a dent in that project if you can? Charlie, inarguably to me, if he was going to make that pivot, which I think is now in the public record that he was making that pivot, and as you said, we all change. And if he was going to make that change, he's actually a very dangerous character in that story because of how many people he reaches. And there are a few others, but Royce, there's a handful. And you and I can name them all right
Yeah.
now. And I think they're all in severe danger at this point in time. I just do, because of, if you go to Wikipedia, even, I know people are going to be like, oh gosh, Chris, you're going so anti-Semitic. Like, no, I'm a data guy. Go to Wikipedia, ask how many extraterritorial assassinations has Mossad been involved in? And Wikipedia breaks it down by decade because there's so many, right? Would you like to know about the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s? I mean, it's
I
just
was
like
just going to say
it's who
to
they
you,
are.
I was just going to say to you, I don't think your average American citizen, let alone your average evangelical Christian, has any idea the rap sheet on Mossad and their assassinations. I mean, they are probably the most feared assassination wing of any intelligence agencies in the
Mhm.
entire world. I mean, they're right up there rivaling, what how people used to talk about the KGB, and of course MI6, and the British probably do it just as well as anybody also. And if ipso facto, MI6, CIA, and Mossad, where's the separation between the three? Well, not much. The Five Eyes would suggest there's a lot of crossover, with those organizations. But Mossad is notorious for not only assassinations, but kind of a braggadocious sort of, we'll do it, and everybody kind of knows we did it, and what are you going to do about it?
Mhm.
Who's gonna do anything about it, because America's our big brother, or we are do you believe that Mossad is the an independent actor, or are they the strong arm that does the things that the CIA and the American intelligence community can't do?
Well, no, I think they all do it. But you're right. I think it's the braggadocio aspect of it. Mossad both does it and lets you know they did it. And they're fairly proud about that. And it's a way, it's a way to go through life. But I do think it's completely clear. Like if somebody said, "Oh, they wouldn't do that," like of course they would do that. They do stuff like that all the time. You have to break it down by the year to even get a handle on the volume of data around that stuff. So that is a thing. It's just how it is, and I think we should just wake up to that idea because, as this is all unfolding right now, Royce, the obviously there's some sort of anti-Western civilization project unfolding right now, right? And whoever's behind that. And it means we have open borders and we have like floods of people who are culturally dissimilar coming in and oversaturating the ability to absorb and assimilate them. We have no ability to even like defend ourselves if we live in Canada from the idea that we can't say that we wouldn't want our son or daughter to be chemically castrated or mutilated or something like that because that'd be hate crime and on and on and on. We're under attack. And at the same time this is happening, we're at this really crazy part of worldwide geopolitical development where China is busy making inroads. I don't know if you saw, they've got a new port they just opened down in Peru. And guess what? The Peruvians love the idea that China poured billions and built them a whole port, which they had to, build this whole, you know, retaining wall. And it was not an inexpensive project. They were building libraries in El Salvador. They're putting roads all across Middle East, North Africa, South America. So China's out there with what we call checkbook diplomacy. And we're still stomping around going, oh, well, maybe we'll just send 5,000 Marines in to get Nicolas Maduro out because we don't like him, right? And so there's a might makes right approach to this, and I can't find any daylight between the United States and Israel's approach on that, right? They both believe in that. That's diplomacy second, bare knuckle brawling first, particularly with overwhelming power, subterfuge, whatever it takes, right?
Yeah.
Because that's sort of a mindset of how you go about getting your way in the world. And I can't see that there's any daylight between our two countries at this point in time. And I wish it was different because I happen to believe that in a world of, $100 trillion of debt in the United States system across everything, not just federal, and with the need for things to go perfectly, with us having hollowed out our entire manufacturing base,
Yeah.
AI racing in to like kick out the other 50% of jobs that we haven't lost yet, on and on and on. We have all these like really existential crises. The last thing we can afford is to go into a dust up with Russia or see if we can do a regime change in Venezuela or try that old model. I think it's a broken model. And I really, really wish Trump wasn't, busy doing the same stuff as the old boss in that regard, because we don't have time for this. We really don't in this story.
Well, and I'll say, you know, I have, criticisms of a lot of things that the Trump administration has done. I do think we came out much, much better than if we would have chose the alternative. I mean, it's almost incalculable what the alternative would have meant. And
No disagreement on that.
yeah,
But
and in that regard, I'm a huge Trump 2028 fan. Now, I say that because one, it pisses the left off. I sent Gavin Newsom some 2028 hats, and I love watching him cry about it on the stage there. But
all caps.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But yeah, the ball caps, the Trump 2028 ball caps. But I do say it in the sense that what you brought up is completely accurate. This has been the business model of our country, our administrative state, our security state, our intelligence community, the DC swamp. This has been the business model for a long time. I mean, since World War II. I mean, since the latest industrial era, really, and all the technological advancements that have come with it. We at the same time, I give President Trump a lot of grace, honestly, because I know and there are things that are going on that we just don't know. I mean, and part of the responsibility of a great leader is to be able to articulate some of those things to their constituents, which is the entire country if you're president of the United States. But that's all things fair and equal, and considering that people actually care about the important things. And in politics, I go all around the state of Minnesota, and I can't tell you how much WWE politics with French fries. Let's get together, have a beer, have some hot dogs and chicken wings, talk about the latest thing that we saw in the headlines of Apple or New York Times or even Fox News or wherever, and then go home and we did the thing. We were citizens today. Uh,
Mhm.
that really drives American political culture. So I ask myself, like, we're doing ourselves as citizens. We're doing ourselves, not you, obviously. You go in depth, and so for that reason, you get to demand the highest standard, even of President Trump and the administration. The same way Bannon goes, Steve has been as supportive of President Trump as you can possibly get, but on certain things like HB1 visas, it's like, we're not budging there, or another Greater Israel project, we're not budging there. You know what I mean? So when you are involved in politics at the level that you guys are, I think you have earned the right to demand a high standard. But do you think that the American people really want or could even handle the truth? And I say that, I mean, and my philosophy as a Senate candidate, and I run into trouble all the time, is tell the people the truth and let the chips fall where they may. But I'm also not president of the United States. I'm also not read into all of the classified information. Do you think that American citizens could, in fact, deal with the truth if President Trump just came right out and said, "You know what? I am worried that Israel will assassinate me." Now, what are you citizens gonna how, okay, and even with the Republican Party, the consultants, you go, "Well, you got to win elections." Well, I said this to a guy the other day. He was critical of President Trump taking the APAC money, and I wouldn't take any. But does President Trump win without APAC support in 24? I don't know. I don't think he does. And so for that, I mean, it's possible, but my analytical brain says I honestly don't think he gets over the hump unless some portion of the Israel lobby was willing to ride ride for the time being. So what do you make of all of that? I mean, I'm just spitballing, but I give him some credit and some grace because I really do think he's the one lone man that has both pushed back against the machine and now gotten into the seat of power 2 times against all conventional odds. And he is saying the wrong thing away from taking another shot. I mean, we all know it. It's kind of unspoken, but it's like we all kind of know if he pushes too hard here, he might not be seeing the end of this term. Unfortunately, what do you make of that?
Well, let's go up, if we could, one more layer real quick,
Okay.
because there's a hypothesis here, which is that the president has a lot of power and authority, and we're glad Trump got in there because he can wield it now, and it's better than the alternative. And then there's another hypothesis that says actually doesn't really matter who's in that seat. That's just for us at the retail level to say, oh, my guy, your guy, look at the difference. But in fact, in my entire adult life, Royce, there's been zero daylight on foreign policy. It doesn't matter if you have a chicken hawk in there, a liberal, it doesn't matter. We do the same things. As you say, the business of the United States is war. That's
Amen.
who we
Right.
are,
Right.
right? And so maybe it's above Trump's pay grade, to put it that way, right? It's like, listen, Trump, you can be as powerful as you want to be. You can be as forceful. You can be as honest as you want to be. But as soon as the Ukraine war winds down, we're going to spool up another one because that's just how we do this, right? We're going to
Do you
need
think
something
that's
to
what it
keep.
is? So, and again,
Yeah,
back to
I do.
yeah. And so, and I try and tell people this all the time. And when Steve says, I'm a huge fan of Bannon. I think he's the tip of the spear. Him and guys like you are very, very big on the details and the nuance, and you have a way of disseminating it for your listeners. When Steve says President Trump needs us, he doesn't need us to be fans. He doesn't need us to. I mean, the Trump 2028 hats are great, and I love wearing them. And there's this political banter going on between us and the left that is, endless, unlimited entertainment value, right? But when he says President Trump needs us, I really take it as he needs citizens to step up and be courageous enough to continue to demand the truth and push back against the convenience of the narrative, just as you're saying. And we're all starting to kind of see it. And even lately, I mean, very dangerous for him to come out and say, I mean, even Kushner was like, hey, I think Israel's getting a little out of control. I mean, for Jared Kushner to
For
say,
Kushner?
for Jared Kushner to say Israel's, off the chains is a profound development in his own political
Mhm.
life and profile. But it's important for us to ask these questions and to encourage President Trump. The one thing I am so thankful is he's somebody who you can tell listens to the people, in the sense that if something's going one way and the people react and he's a true populist candidate in that regard. Now, the one hurdle we still have to get over with the president and this administration is this military industrial complex foreign policy. I always say that America doesn't have an authentic foreign policy. Our entire foreign policy is Great Britain's foreign policy. Our war with China is Great Britain's war. Our war in the Middle East is Great Britain's war. Our war with Russia is certainly Great Britain's war. So, uh, if you were the president, let's just put you in the seat. And he's done a great job with the border. I mean, nobody can argue. We had 15 million people come in over 4 years. It went down to almost zero in 6 months. So if you don't have a border, you don't have a country. So that can't be dismissed. But that's domestic policy, not foreign policy. If you were going to attack the business model of the British Empire, I'm just going to say it like it is, or this Zionist lobby, or even these Gucci Bedouins there in the Middle East who are, kind of stringing us along, the Qatars of the world. And I like Tucker, but I'm no friend of this, this Mamdani sort of movement either, right? And I don't think he is either. I think they're trying to paint him as such, and it's just disgusting. They're trying to cancel him. It's like, if you're an American journalist, you can question and interview whoever you want. I remember seeing Christopher Wallace's father interview the Grand Wizard of the KKK. Nobody looked at it and said, "Don't platform him. We want to hear what everybody has to say." Anyway, if you're in the seat, how do you go about deconstructing the stranglehold that the security state and the intelligence agencies, what we call the deep state, and this international, kind of shadowy government, how do you really disrupt that in the 4 years that President Trump has? Or do you need another 4 years? And is it a matter of national security, sir?
It's huge, national security, huge, huge. And so here's what I do. I have a 2-step program. Step 1, I arrest every person who engaged in treason, sedition, and otherwise was an enemy of the state. And the target list is long, and these cases should be dead simple to put together. Okay. I don't want to see some, misdemeanor against Comey or something like that. I mean, I'm talking to people who put together the Russiagate. We know that the 2020 election was completely fraudulent. We know that ballots were brought in from China, right? We know that there was this seditious attempt to undermine the president that came from the other president before, right? We know all this stuff.
Hell, General Milley.
Who's really
General Milley.
Yeah, Milley. You know who's doing this? It's Tulsi. About once a month, she comes out and drops these big bombs. Hey, look, here's all this evidence that Obama committed treason, right? And then nothing happens. So step 1, if you don't arrest them, nothing changes. So by doing that, I think Trump's missing a huge opportunity here. They'll just come at him a second time, a third time. They will not stop. These people are relentless. And if they are consequence free, they're double relentless. They talk about this stuff. They brag about it openly in public and nothing happens. It's like Biden sitting down going, "Oh yeah, I had to pay that guy $1 billion to get that thing against Trump out of Ukraine." Like, they're just open about it.
Yeah.
Okay. That's step 1. Step 2 is, this is really easy. Follow the money. I was so excited. January, Elon sleeping in sleeping bags on the floor like a world's richest man ought to, he's got his team of 22-year-olds in there, and they are like, that whole romp through USAID was just a work of art. I loved it, right?
Yeah.
And
amen.
the one thing the bureaucratic deep state couldn't figure out how to get around was an AI tool that pattern matches. They had all their little things and fiefdoms and little accounting tricks and off book, black budget. That all falls apart when you get your claws in the server and you let the AI pattern match. And that was going great. And then Trump shut it down, right? And then, threw Elon under the bus. I thought that was bad form, but that's me. I would love to continue to follow the money. So just the other day, Kash Patel's in front of the Senate, and he goes, I think it was Senator Kennedy was asking him, like, really? Epstein was the only one who made use of these young women? And Epstein said, Kash says, yeah, without a doubt, he was the only one. We just have no credible evidence, that anybody else partook of these women. I'm like, dude,
ridiculous.
Follow the money. Leon Black of the Apollo Group paid 8 of the victims millions of dollars. like famous wealthy Jewish PE guys do. They just hand out millions of dollars to people because that's how they operate. No. Like, I mean,
No,
come on.
no.
This couldn't be easier to get down. So they haven't followed the money. And the money is the root of all evil in this story. And for the love of money is the root of all evil. And we have a corrupt system of money. So if I'm Trump and I want to deep state this, like, you give me one chance, you say, Chris, you have one wooden stake to put in this thing. I have the United States Treasury begin issuing its own money. And we bypass the entire fraudulent banking system, the entire fraudulent Federal Reserve, back it with gold, back it with Bitcoin, back it with both, back it with banana peels. I don't care. But you issue straight from the Treasury, and this begins to undo the corrupt network of money that's actually funding this whole thing.
One of the tough pills to swallow is Epstein. There's no doubt about it, and I think it's going to hurt us in 2026. I think, unfortunately, Charlie's murder, Charlie's assassination, is going to help in 2026. One of the strange numbers, and one of the strange statistics I keep coming across that keeps me up at night is, the Christian participation in these elections. Now, it's hard for me to make out if the Christians are voting and they're not being counted, if they're being miscounted, or if they're actually not showing up. All of them, present a huge problem. But even, for example, here in Minnesota, there was estimated 1.4 million Christian and conservative crossover didn't vote in the 2024 presidential election, and somewhere close to 30 million nationwide. So I think that Charlie's assassination will bring Christians out here in 2026 midterms and in 2028. Um, I do think that there is another constituency growing that you can hear online, you can see online, you can hear online, talking about Epstein, APAC, our relationship with Israel, our foreign policy in general. And there's a lot of people in the MAGA movement who are very, very disheartened by exactly what you're saying. You see these, these things that are being announced in Tulsi, and then you don't get the prosecutions. Now, in the interest of, and I'm with you 100%, I think these people should be arrested. I kind of agree with some of the more radical people out there right now. Like, I saw the other day, Fuentes was on with Tucker, and the world lost their mind. It's like,
Yep.
guys, first of all, I know the kid has said some crazy stuff online. We all have. I've said some crazy shit myself. Maybe not as salacious, but it is what it is. Point out the things in the interview that you disagree with. Don't bring me something from 2017 and say, well, this is the discrediting material. It's like, okay, fair. You can always go back in people's past and go, this says something about a person. Okay, but people change. We know that. If that weren't the case, then Obama, Biden, Hillary Clinton were all very, very anti-immigration at a point in their career. Chuck Schumer, too. Jamie Raskin, all of them. I mean, they were America firsters on immigration policy, yesteryear. But
Didn't Hillary Clinton, who was it they called black people super predators?
that would be Hillary Clinton.
Oh, right.
Yes.
So
That would be Hillary Clinton. And Bill,
just saying.
Bill wasn't much better. And in the Fuentes, in Tucker interview, Fuentes says you have to crush these people, and I agree. I've been saying it for 2 or 3 years. I've been saying, you guys, you cannot
He's
play.
right.
You cannot play nice with these people. I mean, they have shown, if nothing else, the Charlie Kirk assassination and the response
Mm-hmm.
shows their lack of sacred honor. I mean, they have no sacred honor whatsoever. They're willing to besmirch the dead, dance on his grave, celebrate, even call for the assassination of his wife and his children. I mean, these people don't even pretend that they have any honor code, and yet we still want to keep up with the charade of political theater. Now, how much of that is conservative ink that's around President Trump, trying to maintain the opposition, controlled opposition, and how much of it is President Trump's personal and individual desire to navigate politics as best as he can? Do you think it's more of that? Again, the National Review never. I mean, Bill Kristol, and he endorsed Mamdani, and this is a neoconservative Jew
Yeah.
who's saying, "Give me the radical communist Muslim in the world's financial capital." It's almost inconceivable that he would even say it publicly, but you look at that and go, a lot of what we see not happening. And again, I say Bill Kristol because he's just a figurehead, but we know, you and I know, I wish more Americans knew that the people who are littered through the Republican Party come from Bill Kristol's father's school of thought in the William Buckley National Review wing of the Republican Party. What's your analysis? How much can we accredit to which?
So I do think that the entire neocon movement, you take it from its roots with the Straussian thinking and maybe even its Fabian socialist roots to begin that, which is still running most of the UK. You mentioned Great Britain being sort of a source of things. So you have this sort of, and they're not Jewish in the sense that that's a religion. Maybe culturally they are, but they're godless. They're mostly atheists, right? And they believe in these socialist Marxist ideals. And so one of those socialist Marxist ideals, because I mentioned before, like I can't just say, oh, look at accidentally, we did all these things to ruin our youth and destroy our borders and make sure that we have like, ruined economy and high inflation. Listen, as they say, once is an accident, twice is coincidence, but three times is enemy action. So I have detected, Royce, that there's a pattern I can see here where there are certain people like Billy Crystal who their main aim, it's hard to understand through the lens of like, wait a minute, I thought you were a neocon and you were Jewish, so why Mandami? You can't like square that circle. But if you understand that Bill Crystal's main aim is to destroy the country, well, it all fits perfectly. Everything he's ever done, every foreign misadventurism, ruinous levels of military spending, ridiculous laws that they promote, like all of it, they have, for whatever reason, they want to destroy the country, but they told us that. You remember? I remember too much, but I remember when Biden was on the campaign trail with Harris. Their official campaign website didn't say bidenharris.gov. It literally was buildbackbetter.gov. So these Build Back Better people, who are they? Well, that's a WF kind of a thing. We're going to build back the world better. It's a utopian, socialist, Marxist, Fabian ideal. We're going to get to this new world, and it's going to be amazing. It's going to be full of equity and inclusion and diversity and all that stuff that they talk about. Now, they're a little vague on exactly how you get there. They're a little vague on what that utopia is going to feel like when you get there. And they're exactly not just vague, but completely bereft of any examples where it's ever worked in history without actually going the other direction and resulting in mass atrocities and immiseration. Fine. But they're going to get it right this time. So how do you build something back? Well, you got to kind of destroy it first.
Yeah.
So once you see things through this lens, I can fit a lot of these people into these categories where their clear intent is to first destroy Western civilization. Notice you've never read a single book by a single famous Jewish thought leader or think tank or conservative whatever or neocon central that said, we really should lean on China to take a lot more people from North Africa, right? Because this isn't a China dismantling project.
Right.
Nobody's banging on Indonesia's door explaining that they're a little racist for not taking more people from some other culture. That doesn't happen.
That's right. That's right.
You do. I do. Now, where's that come from? And it's very easy to chase it back. There's just a few pools of money and a few schools of thought that sort of funnel down through all of that.
Yes.
And that's what's being exposed. And that's why there was this like extreme temper tantrum you saw because Tucker dared to talk to Fuentes and they had a reasonable conversation. I thought it was pretty reasonable. I saw points of disagreement. I didn't agree with anything either of them said in entirety, but I agreed with a lot of what both of them had said in various points. Fine. You know what happens next? Nothing. You let people have a conversation, you roll on, unless you're worried that your larger project is going to get exposed and the people who want to destroy the country want to be exposed. And that's how I interpret Bill Kristol. And it makes it easy for me to understand who he is. Because once I have this lens, Royce, that says everything he's doing is in service of destroying the country at a cultural level, a spiritual level, a family level, an economic level. This is a multi-front attack, right? They're not just like coming at us like World War I with machine guns and you got to go over the top. This is sophisticated and they're hitting us on all of our pieces. But most importantly, They're hitting us at our core conceptual level. If I can make you ashamed of being a Christian or of being a man, if I can toxify your ability to self-gate check so you feel like you don't have the right to even say what's on your mind, well, now I've won. And that's the battle that's getting exposed
Okay,
right now.
well, you bring up two important points in that consideration. One of them being China. China's not a punk, so you're not just going to walk people across their border anyway. I tell people all the time, you get yourself on a plane, you fly yourself over to the continent of Africa, Europe, or Asia, and try and walk across that Chinese border, and you're going to find out real quick how xenophobic the Chinese actually are. They're all for building a hospital in Nairobi. Let some of those people from Nairobi try and backtrack their way to the source of the build there, and they're going to find unfriendly territory. But in that same regard, what do they get out of it? Because if we go to this globalist utopia that they seem to desire, they're not in charge. I mean, that makes it kind of a strange equation too, doesn't it? Because I mean, the Bill Crystals of the world, the European globalist elites, they're not staying in charge of the game when the CCP become the center of the future global economy, which it looks like they're destined to become. The Bill Crystals of the world aren't king on the throne in that. So are we looking at some strange geopolitical cuckery for the Chinese even in that regard? Because
Could be.
all roads look like they're headed toward China being the king in that scenario, in that event, in that project. What do they get out of it? What do they get out of the destruction of the West?
Well, that cuckery is interesting. This is an idea that I've been formulating for a while because I'm just trying to fit patterns. Like we have all these dots, and you know how it is. We're humans. We look up in the sky and we see dots, and we call it a whale or a Scorpio or something, right? But trying not to overfit it, I have another way I can look at the world, and I can say, wow, everything that China kinds of needs right now, they're kind of getting, right? And so would it surprise us to be how disappointed would it be to find out that there's some Chinese money and it's a disappointingly small amount and it was sufficient to buy off, your Swalwells or your whomevers, right? It could fit. But if you understand the world the way I do in terms of resources, like where are we really? How much copper is out there and how much fresh water is there and how much oil is there and all of that, you can clearly see that we're at a new phase of the story, and China gets it 100%. I know this personally. I know this for a fact. They understand the world the way I do, which is, well, he who has access to those resources, the future belongs to them. So that's part one. Part two, anybody who analyzes this, Royce, at all, we've already lost the next war with China. Like we shouldn't even try it. We'll just, it'll be very disappointing. We'll probably kick ass for like 2 weeks, but all wars are logistics and material supply chains. China can out-manufacture us like 100 to 1, right? In terms of everything.
This is Mackinder's World Island theory, right?
Yeah. If we can't afford to go to war with them, right? We can't, and because we've already lost. And so I think there was some grand hope back in the day, 2008, and they sort of pushed the whole Maidan revolution. 2013 started killing people in the eastern oblasts down there in 2014 onward. Finally, Putin steps in with his special military operation 22. And I think they were kind of hoping that Russia would fall apart real quick. That's always the neocon dream. Oh, flowers and and children at our feet greeting us as liberators, right? Never works out that way. Russia's actually stronger today than they were at the start of the war. So, but the idea was they were going to be able to colonize that whole part and bust up Russia into a variety of smaller states and take their resources, right? Oldest story in the book. I don't see that happening, and that's not going to work out right now. So that story is gone. China has now ascended to the point where we can no longer reasonably attack them at this stage. And so now what? Well, now kind of, I guess you're left with a thing where the United States has to accept on some level that it's no longer a unipolar world. We don't just get to might makes right. That's why we're beating up on Venezuela, because they're kind of in our backyard, right? We're not over there attempting to, do crazy
For
stuff
sure,
in
they're in
Saudi
our
Arabia.
backyard. For sure.
Yeah. So that's kind of how I see it. And you remember one of the first things Trump did was like 51st state. How about Greenland? Like
Yeah.
I was looking at that as just an idea of saying, hey,
Hemispheric strategy. Hemispheric defense.
Yeah, we'll take this part. Yeah.
What do you think
Maybe
about that?
that's
I completely, you said about I'm as much of a anti-forever war as they get. And people always call me out on it. They go, well, what about Venezuela? You want to start another war in Venezuela? Geopolitical jump ball, Russia, Europe, China, Middle East, South America is kind of America. I mean, depending on how things shake out, it is not apropos to the name, but it really it's kind of America. I mean, or it should be. And I'm not saying that we should have jurisdiction, but what I do mean is, part of this entire geopolitical scam, it always shocks me that you get so many liberal academic elites who say, you should let all of these illegal immigrants come live in your country because of the geopolitical philosophy and strategy and business model that we created that displaced them in the first place. That's fucking crazy to me. I'm just like, damn, you guys are brazen as hell. Not only did you create the strategy, then you justify us having to come let these people live in our already oversaturated slum communities. And a lot of them are, they got the marble and the granite countertops, but it's still pretty,
Yeah.
rough living for most of these major cities. And it's like, you guys created this theory. And I kind of look at it and I think, maybe we should. Maybe we should take South America. Maybe we should take Canada. Maybe we should take Greenland. Now, what does it cost for us to do it, and what does it cost to defend those new territories? But all in all, we kind of supplement the entire security, for the deal anyway because of the dollar. They all trade in dollars, so it's like, well, what do you make of that? I mean, should we just go to this hemispheric strategy and say, let's play our end of the board and proceed like that?
All energy is power, and all powers comes from energy. Uh, Carter with the cardigan, he came up with a doctrine that we had to be over there in the Middle East, make sure we could defend that so that our oil would flow. But it was more than that. It was that the oil was going to be priced in dollars and it's going to flow to the world, right? And that's extraordinary. So that is power. You can't, if you don't understand energy in this story, none of it makes sense. That's why we've been absolutely greenwashed with, oh my God, windmills and solar. Interesting niche technologies, but like people don't understand energy. So our energy blindness is really profound. But trust me, they still get it in the halls of power. Venezuela has the number one proven oil reserves in the entire world,
Yeah.
larger than Saudi Arabia, who's clocking in at number two. Number three is not Canada, it's Alberta, to be specific about this. So if Alberta wanted to break away and join the US, I'm sure we'd be like, yeah, that's awesome. However, Albertans, if you're listening, you should break away and form your own country because Alberta, by the numbers, Royce, would be richer than Norway. And the people in Norway are quite rich because if you look at the number of barrels coming out of the ground per capita, they should be some of the wealthiest people in the world.
In
They should all
Alberta.
be walking around Alberta.
Yeah.
Yep. Unfortunately, Ottawa siphons all their money out and wastes it on various things. So it's a big problem. But Alberta could be inarguably on a per capita basis and should be for the next 30, 40, 50 years, one of the wealthiest countries on the planet, right up there with any of the oil sheiks from any of the Middle Eastern countries. But if you had that, if we had, the United States is clocking in much lower to like 7 or 8 on that list, but it's still high. So if we had those three together, the United States plus Canada plus Venezuela, all right, now we have a real source of power, true power that we can project. We can sell it. We can trade it. We can withhold it in emergencies, whatever the story is, but we have real leverage under that scenario. And so I can make sense of it from that. Now, again, I'm a truth guy. Can Americans handle the truth? If he said, listen, Trump says, listen, Venezuela has all this oil. It's being managed poorly, by the way. They're getting barely 1 million barrels a day out. We think that should be 3, 4, 5 million barrels a day. We think we can get it there in a decade. And by the way, we think we should be running that. Here's why. At least you could chew on that and say, oh, okay, well, I don't know, pluses, minuses. Is it moral? Is it ethical?
Hey,
Does it make sense?
here's the thing, and I'll say this. I'm all about the moral and the ethical. I really am. However, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, no doubt about it. We're obviously going to a hemispheric defense strategy in many regards. The relics of the conservative Inc. neocon foreign policy are still in our way in many respects, especially there in the Middle East. But even this Ukraine deal, I mean, there's going to be an entire referendum now. I ran in 2024. I said, border debt forever wars, and even I thought President Trump's getting in there and we're going to be, disengaging from this Ukraine thing in no time. I won't have to bring that back up. Looks like I was wrong. Looks like we're going to have to continue to support President Trump in trying to get us out of that conflict. However, I don't really trust Vladimir Putin either, and I think that he's just smart enough to understand our politics and instigate where he needs to instigate to make it difficult for President Trump to pull out of it. Not that he can't, but President Trump is a part of a generation that just by, osmosis believes that America is the empire and we should continue to play empire and our security guarantee and our US dollar are our greatest assets. And in some respects, it's true because that's how we built our business model. The question is, can we pivot in the vision that he has laid out and has teased? I think we actually can. I think it's feasible. You're saying from an energy standpoint, it actually would be feasible to go to a hemispheric strategy and be able to sustain in the coming change of polarity around the world.
Oh, absolutely. That would be a huge possibility for a number of decades to come. So listen, you asked also, let me back up. You said,
Yeah.
what would you do if you were Trump? And here's the thing. So we now know that China's just absolutely torching us in terms of manufacturing, right? Very diligent, hardworking people. They had to work it out, but they got it. And they have their whole integrated supply chain so that when they make a iPhone, all the components are like within 3 miles of the plant, in this feeder system. And it's takes time to build those up. And we got robotics now, right? We just had the CEO of Ford came back and said he was shocked and scared by what he saw, where they have these plants in China where they're basically churning out a car every 2 or 3 minutes, right? Just coming right out of this factory. And there's practically no humans involved. And so it runs 24/7 as long as you have the parts, right? So all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, we don't want to be China's bitch. And we're going to have to get supply chains back here. And we're going to have to like rebuild manufacturing. The first thing we have to do
Deregulate.
is deregulate.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Trump made a couple noises back in February, if I'm remembering. He's like, oh, we're going to like slash regulations. But they really should. I mean, they really should. I can tell you as somebody trying to live in this country as a business person, the regulations are stupid, senseless, and expensive, and they go up every single year.
Yeah.
And we got to get a handle on that, or we'll never be competitive. I don't care how much energy we have.
Last question before we head out here. Artificial intelligence, the usefulness versus the dangers. When I see people like the godfather, they call him, of AI, say, AI uncontrollability, as they call it, is much more dangerous than we could have ever imagined. Now they're reporting that when they tell certain artificial intelligence programs that they're going to delete them, they are rewriting their code in another place. So transporting their code to somewhere they see as more safe, and then actively looking at the CEOs of the company to find compromising material to blackmail them in extramarital sexual scandals and things of that sort. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, when you're starting to get that type of sentient divergence of agenda, from the robots and from the machines, from the computers versus what they were built to do and what they're asked to do, I'm worried. I mean, I really am. Although I think we find ourselves in a strange bottleneck here where there's no way we've let industrialization come so far and we're so dependent on technology. I don't see how we can win the coming war. And there's a war we're already in. It's not coming. We're in it now. We're in the early stages of it. But I don't see how we can win without AI. And at the same time, AI may end up being the most dangerous thing. And I'm completely against digital ID. What do you make of the AI thing to end here, sir?
Mm. Well, it's an area that I don't think anybody, Royce, really has a handle on anymore. I've talked to a lot of people who are deep in the field, some of them with gray hair, some of them with, super hotshot kids, right? Everybody's got their hand on the elephant now, and they're all describing a snake, a wall, a tree trunk, right? Because it's too big. It's out of the box, right? And the only thing that I really heard that sort of concerned me was somebody who was deep in it said, we probably should have done this in a desert with an air gap around this thing. But it's out in the wild. Everybody's playing with it. And so the concern is that we're watching now how AI is coming up with stuff that we weren't predicting because it's a complex system. So it has what's called emergent behavior.
Right.
And you have the naysayers and they're like, oh, Chris, don't worry about it. Garbage in, garbage out. It can never be more than the sum of its parts. It'll never, it only knows what we give it. But when you understand complex systems in what's called emergent behavior, it's just something that happened that you couldn't have predicted, but there it is. And that's what the blackmailing the CEO is all about and that stuff. So we're seeing more and more emergent behaviors. And to make it really kind of scary, you and I are using words, language that has meaning. The computers now in AI, to save time, save processing time, are starting to process not in words, right? They're processing in machine language. So they're basically speaking in a language that we can't interpret. We need a compiler and an interpreter and a thing to slow it down. So who even knows what it's going to do? Now we already know.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, so it's already doing stuff we don't know about, but we have to watch it. And I've heard some pretty scary stuff behind the scenes from people who are in non-public models saying this stuff's starting to get alarming for us, right? Okay, so maybe it's Skynet, something like that. But on the other side, we've seen that, we're humans. We got some wetware, we got a little bit of hardware, and we're wired in through a very long string of evolution, and we don't change that quickly. And we've already seen people get into ChatGPT induced psychosis, where they get in some involved conversation with ChatGPT that convinces them they're the next messiah or their wife is the devil or whatever's going on. And so we're really no match for this. And this is the one thing I know about technology in America. We only ever look at the positive side of it, and we never, ever slow down to consider the negative side. I guarantee in 10, 20 years, we're going to look back and go, wow, putting 3-year-olds on iPads, even if they were like harmless games, was a bad idea because we were blowing out their dopamine circuits. They were otherwise not fashioning neural circuitry that comes from falling down on the ground and, getting clocked on the head by a sibling with a telephone or whatever the story is. We're going to find out that we really damaged human development.
Yeah.
But who isn't confused by that? China. They cut off. If you go to China and you look at TikTok, dude, it's kids doing science experiments and playing cello and, taking care of granny. It's like none of the crap we have over here. And it's very limited and constrained.
It's not pornography.
And
It's not 60% pornography.
nope. Nope. They won't allow it to capture their children's development circuitry, which is
Smart.
too easy to do. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm worried AI, we're only looking at, oh my God, look, this is going to be the greatest thing. It's going to steal all our jobs, but don't worry. This works out. And I'm very worried about it. I think it has A, the chance to go rogue on us, but B, for sure, it's going to, who are we if we don't 60% of the jobs in America are what David Graeber, the economist, called bullshit jobs. Like if somebody stops doing them, nothing bad happens. Like how long has the government been on shutdown, right? Because I'm not a government worker and didn't need something from the government, I haven't even noticed, right? So I think government jobs are actually infinitely replaceable by AI, but so are our paralegals, so are coders, so are entry-level people on the front end of medical offices, probably a lot of doctor specialties. All of these things are replaceable. And if we do that, then we get to the more existential question of, well, who are we as humans and what are we up to?
Right.
And that gets really concerning pretty quick because, again, our cultural capacity to have nuanced conversations, which is the subtext for everything you and I have been talking about, is kind of poor at a cultural level.
Right. Yeah. I totally agree with you. 1000%. Scary time. Predictions here. Tomorrow, well, I think that we're going to actually run this on Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. But prediction in the outcome of this New York City mayor's race, and what do you think it does? Because I know you're a big financial guy, capital markets and things like that. You're watching how the money flows. What does the outcome look like for a publicly admitted communist like Mamdani to be the mayor of the world's financial capital? What does that end up looking like in the short term and the long term?
Well, it's going to take him a little while if he wins to really do a lot of damage, but he basically will be like Sadiq Khan in London. Eventually, he'll turn it into more of an S-hole than it already kind of is. I know people who I haven't been to New York in about a year, but people who were there a year ago and then just went a few weeks ago told me that they were shocked at the level of decline that they had seen. This is pre-Mamdani, right? So, and this is just sort of the affect of the people, how much you smell weed everywhere, and the dirtiness of it, and it just feels like it's kind of in decline. So, you know, listen, if I could just put this up though, when we talk about elections, they just rescored what happened in Georgia, and they found out there were 540 plus thousand registration violations. This is just for the 22 election. 240,000 practically unique ballots impacted by voting violations, 34,000 more votes counted than voters who voted. Right? Like, you see this, like this doesn't, Royce, this isn't just sort of maybe bad. This is terrible. We don't have legitimate voting in this country. We haven't since these machines. We need to just go back to paper and ballots and count them up, right? And if we don't do that, see, here's the thing. The people who cheat, they continue to cheat. There have been no consequences for cheating. Nobody's gone to jail. Nobody's gone to jail for life. Nobody's like lost their entire family fortune in a mega fine. Nothing has ever happened. And so we have a system of cheating, and it's gotten very entrenched in some places. And Georgia's one of them, unfortunately. But I think until we fix that, we can vote all we want, but nothing's going to change.
Who counts the votes is important. The great Chris Martenson, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate your time today, brother. We look forward to getting you back on the show in the future at some point. It's always a pleasure to be with you and watch your work, and let us know as things unfold in your investigation into this Charlie Kirk assassination. Like I said, the MAGA and America First world, as well as the rest of the country, is deeply, deeply interested, and for good reason, in what actually took place there on that day with Charlie Kirk's assassination. Yeah, I mean, we're in interesting times, brother. We're in interesting times. So stay safe,
We
stay
are.
dangerous. We appreciate you. Look forward to having you again. God bless you, man.
Thank you. Thank you, Royce.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That was the great Chris Martenson. I hope you enjoyed our family and friends edition of Please Call Me Crazy this evening. Again, I thought we had an incredible discussion. Chris Martenson, very detail oriented, very honest in his criticism of this administration thus far, while being very positive and optimistic about the prospects of the future, including the hemispheric strategy based on energy and oil, which I thought was a very profound point to make, and an honesty, a level of honesty that I think the administration needs to hear and potentially utilize. Just come out and say it. We're going to take South America and some other. We're going to take Alberta because we're in an energy race, and that's what it's. And not only that, but for too long, for too long, by too many people, we were taken to the cleaners in some of these globalist agendas, and now it's time to be more strategic and more, logical about our approach to things. Completely fine with that. Completely fine with that. Let's just tell people what it really is. Do the Venezuelans run drugs? Sure. Okay, fine. Not saying that they don't. Not saying we shouldn't crush the cartels. Not saying that we shouldn't use the full force of the American military in our fight against the cartels and anybody else that seeks to poison our people. Not saying that at all. But ultimately, we don't need another Afghanistan. We don't need to go to Afghanistan, in the interest of fighting terror. And then, we want Osama bin Laden. We find him in Pakistan, and the poppy production goes from 3% to 93% while we're there. I like when President Trump said, in retrospect, I think he was talking to Laura Ingraham, if I'm not mistaken, about Syria. And he goes, we're in Syria. We're in control of Syria. Right now we have the oil. We may just take the oil. We could. We might. Right? I mean, geopolitical jump ball, you got to deal with things as they are, not as you wish them to be. And that's the realist. That's being a realist. That's the realism that we need in this country right now. So I hope you enjoyed the interview. I surely did. We'll be back with you tomorrow night again with our regular scheduled program. Please call me crazy. The daily schedule, 9 p.m. Central, Monday through Friday. You can catch us on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio. I forget the other one right now. All of the audio platforms for the podcast, as well as YouTube and Rumble. And a huge shout out to the War Room and War Room Posse and Grace Chong, Maureen Bannon, Cameron, the great Steve Bannon himself for allowing us to be on the War Room platform, both on Rumble and Getter. Thank you so much. We appreciate your viewership and listenership today and in the future. God bless America. Godspeed. God bless you. Have a great day. Have a great evening, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Everything's up on the bar. We're all in. We get to decide. Do you want to live on your knees, or do you want to die on your feet fighting? That's the decision you get to make now.